Missing persons cases very often follow a predictable pattern when investigated by police. The individual gets reported missing, police launch a search, and the person is either found quickly, or in some cases they are never found again. But there are some cases that are seemingly unsolvable until a twist in the tale reveals details that will bring the disappearance to an unexpected close. Number 5. Winston Bright was a 42-year-old man who worked for Verizon in New York in 1990. On October 12th, a day that seemed like any other, he contacted his wife during his lunchtime, as was his habit, and told her that he would see her at home later that evening. When he didn't arrive home at 6 p.m. as scheduled, his wife, Leslie, became worried and started phoning his coworkers. When they told her that they didn't know where he was, she contacted police and reported him missing. A few days later, an investigation was underway, and for the following year, police would search for Winston. Homeless shelters and hospitals were constantly checked. His family put up missing persons posters, and his bank account was monitored, but to no success. 10 years would pass by, and Leslie would find it hard to look after their 3 children, despite having a job as a data capturer, and she moved to a public housing project. In the year 2000, she would eventually petition the courts to have Winston declared officially deceased in order to receive his pension check from his time at Verizon, which spanned 20 years. Then, in 2011, a man named Kwame Sekou from San Diego realized that he was in fact Winston Bright. He had developed amnesia and found himself aimlessly wandering through San Diego with only a few dollars to his name. He chose the new name Kwame because he liked how it sounded, and he began to forge a new life for himself. He gained a master's degree and became a public school teacher. After retiring in 2008, he would start to remember little bits and pieces of his former life, and when he realized who he really was, he traveled back to New York where he reunited with his family. He tried to claim his Verizon pension, but the courts decided he could not prove his identity. After undergoing blood tests that compared his DNA to that of his children, it was confirmed that Kwame and Winston were indeed the same person. He has since decided not to claim his pension, leaving it for Leslie to collect and use as needed. Number 4. On September 6, 2015, 35-year-old Riccardus Puyi from Lithuania was working for Nightlier Leak Company, located in Cambridgeshire. Upon leaving work that day, he was seen in the company of a group of Lithuanian men, and 2 days later, he didn't arrive for his shift at work. Police searched for Riccardus and made multiple public appeals for any information leading to his whereabouts, but nothing came of their efforts. Then, witnesses came forward with evidence that Riccardus had been the victim of a severe assault. They described the attack to police, stating that they had seen him being beaten and stabbed with a set of keys by a man who was known to them. Police followed up on the lead and interviewed the man in question, who reassured them that if he had killed Riccardus, he would not still be in town. 3 years later, in 2018, a Facebook profile under the name of Riccardus was created. This immediately came to the attention of police, who did not know what to make of the new development. They decided to visit with his sister, Renata, in Germany. She told them that whoever had created the profile had contacted her via Messenger and that she believed it really was her brother. A message stated that he'd still been living in town, and police discovered that the profile was being logged into using Wi-Fi from a local supermarket. A stakeout was set in place and further searches were conducted, but nothing was found until the 1st of July 2020, 2 years later, when he was discovered living in a makeshift shelter in the bushes near the supermarket. Riccardus stated that after being repeatedly assaulted and having his wages stolen on multiple occasions, he had decided to run away and live in the bushes instead. Number 3. In August of 2002, Michelle Whitaker was arrested for driving under the influence and public drunkenness. She was working in a dead-end job in a restaurant and had been struggling with substance abuse for some time. She had fought with her mother over the issue on multiple occasions, as her mother believed that tough love was the only solution to Michelle's problems. After spending some time in jail, she was supposed to attend court-ordered treatment for her substance abuse, but thanks to an error, she was released from jail instead and then went missing. Later that month, she was seen trying to get a ride to Truck Stops of America in Spartanburg, but that was the last sighting of her. Then, 1 month after her disappearance, Michelle's coworker, Heather Sellers, also disappeared. Police immediately had a suspect, Jonathan Vick, who was Heather's boyfriend. They had been investigating him for some time as they suspected him of killing a local hairdresser named Dana Satterfield. This caused them to believe that Vick also had a hand in Michelle's disappearance, and from that point on, it was considered a homicide investigation, but they were unable to prove any link between Vick and the two women. Then, in 2005, the Spartanburg Sheriff's Office received an anonymous letter stating that Michelle had been murdered. It also directed police to search for her body at a pond in South Carolina. After searching the area, however, nothing was found and the case went cold. 3 years later, a woman from Oregon was watching an episode of Forensic Files that focused on Jonathan Vick. A photo of Michelle was aired, with the program stating that she was a suspected victim of Vick's. To her great astonishment, the woman realized that the woman in the picture was in fact her neighbor, and she alerted police. She followed up on the lead, and Michelle was found alive and safe, completely unaware that she was the subject of a homicide investigation. Number 2. Laureen Roberts from Dripping Springs, Texas, was a member of her high school basketball team and prep squad before dropping out at age 16 for unknown reasons. She spent some time working as a waitress in Austin before marrying a serviceman in 1949. They had 3 children together, and in 1956, they moved to New Jersey, where her husband hailed from. Her husband's family did not get along with Laureen, and they bought train tickets for her and her children, instructing her to return to Austin, and after doing so, she and her husband divorced. After trying to support herself and her children, she decided that it was an impossible task, and she gave them up for adoption. Following this, her mental state began to deteriorate, and she asked her sister, Ruby, to admit her to a state mental hospital. For the following 4 years, she would check in and out of the hospital 5 times, finding work as a waitress in between, but she would always return when the job stress would get the better of her. Then, in 1959, Laureen arrived at her sister's house and told her that she had gotten engaged to a college professor. Ruby was concerned, as she could tell that Laureen was still unwell, but Laureen left before Ruby could get help for her. 2 weeks later, a bill for Laureen's engagement ring arrived at Ruby's house. Laureen had bought the ring herself and had stopped making payments. In 1964, she was last seen when she was a patient at another mental hospital, and at this point, she had not contacted her family for 5 years. In 1988, Laureen's mother passed away, and it was discovered that she'd left an inheritance of $100,000 for each of her children, with Laureen included. Laureen's children had, in the meantime, found each other again, and her daughter started searching for her in order to ensure that she received her inheritance. They believed that she may have become a transient and that she might not have been aware of her own identity. On December 11, 1991, Laureen watched an episode of Unsolved Mysteries which featured her case. She phoned in and revealed that she now went by the name of Vera and that she'd been living in Little Rock for the past 3 decades. Number 1. Lawrence Bader was a 30-year-old kitchen appliance salesman from Akron, Ohio. He was married to Mary Lou Bader, and the couple had 3 children, with Mary Lou expecting their 4th child. On the surface, Lawrence's life seemed to be idyllic, but unbeknownst to his family, he'd gotten into serious debt to the tune of $20,000, well above what he could afford to pay on his salary. And with the 4th child on the way, things looked like they would only get harder. On the 15th of May, 1957, Bader told his wife that he was going to Cleveland for a business matter, and that once he was there, he might do some fishing. Mary Lou suggested that he skip the fishing trip and return home directly after his business was concluded, and Bader replied that he may or may not come straight home. On his way to Cleveland, he cashed a check for $400 and paid some outstanding bills, one of which was an installment on his life insurance policy. After concluding his business meeting, Bader rented a boat from Eddie's Boathouse on the Rocky River, which he would use for his short fishing trip. While renting the boat, he was warned by Lawrence Kotler that the weather was changing for the worst, but he was undeterred, and at about 4:30 p.m., he set off into the lake. While on the water, he was spotted by the Coast Guard, who once again warned him of the incoming storm. And 3 hours later, the storm had arrived, but there was no sign of Bader. The following morning, his rented boat was found washed up on Perkins Beach, about 5 miles from where he had set off. One of the boat's propellers was bent and one of the oars was missing, but all of the life jackets were still in the boat. After an extensive search by the Coast Guard, nothing was found, and 2 months later, the search was officially called off. 4 days later, a man named John Fritz Johnson started attracting attention in Omaha by sitting on a flagpole for 30 days in a bid to raise money for polio research. This would ultimately result in him becoming a TV sports director at KETV7, affording him minor celebrity status in the area. He would go on to marry Nancy Zimmer, whose daughter he had adopted, and the couple would later have a son together. Then, in February of 1965, while competing in an archery competition in Chicago, a friend of Lawrence Bader's spotted Johnson and immediately recognized him as Bader. He brought Bader's niece, Suzanne, to talk to him, but Johnson denied being Bader, laughing it off. Suzanne and Bader's 2 brothers had the man's fingerprints compared to Bader's military records, and it was found that Johnson and Bader were indeed the same man. After undergoing a 10-day psychiatric examination, it was found that Bader had no recollection of his former life, and that he had likely had a type of amnesia, where missing memories were replaced with false ones. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knots, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.